going on, Jerome's? So this morning we had a full-on rant about how this is BS season and don't believe anything. But I can't stop. I can't stop just like digging on in because this is a fun, interesting, and entertaining time of year for me. And, so for the Minnesota Vikings, yes, looking for the quarterback. May, Daniels, McCarthy, blah, 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 blah. And the Vikings could and should be looking to find a way to trade up if the price is right, and boxing out teams like the Giants, the Broncos, and the Raiders that could potentially be looking to add a quarterback as well. I trust what Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell want to do. They have the ammunition. They have the perfect landing spot for a rookie quarterback, perhaps the best spot for a first-round rookie quarterback in NFL history outside of, I don't know, Mahomes. And Andy Reid and the 12-4 Chiefs. And what was interesting, so Kimberly Martin, very well-respected NFL reporter on ESPN's Get Up, which, Greeny, you should have stuck with Golick long time for Mike and Mike. That was the people's show. That was accessible to everyone. Anyways, but Kimberly was on Get Up with Greenberg and talking about the Vikings making some phone calls, trying to get some business done before the draft, because every other mom knows that the Vikings could trade up during the draft, but before the draft is a whole nother kettle of fish, and that's why it's interesting. Kimberly said this, quote, "The Vikings have been on the phone trying to actively move up. Here's the thing, it's not a done deal. In a perfect world, the Vikings would start Thursday, draft night, with the top 5 pick already in hand. Now, 5 doesn't make any sense. 2, 3, 4 does make sense. We'll get into it. They would have that spot, but it's not guaranteed yet. And their GM, Kwesi, has to decide if they're going to give up the compensation that they need to get into the top 5. Now, as we say, Quay Bono, to whose benefit, everything this time of year, nothing leaks unless there's something attached to it. Now, it is interesting that Kimberly is relaying that the Vikings are looking to trade up before the draft. Now, all those conversations, Kwesi has to be having with all the other GMs, otherwise he's not doing his job. But the notion that the Vikings would look to trade up before the draft, as opposed to a contingent deal, depending on how the board plays out, that is new. That is new. But also, you have to sort of reverse engineer where the information came from. So Kimberly, a former Washington Post columnist and beat writer for the Commanders, right? So even though the Commies have new ownership, new GM, new head coach, I mean, the scouting department, PR staff still largely intact. So Kimberly could have been working those contacts, and she could have gotten some information from up top. And then a scout for the Commies just like, did you hear that the Vikings are on? But of course, the whole thing about it is the GM has to decide if they're going to give up the compensation that they need to get into the top 5. That sounds like it's directly coming from Peters of the Commies, or Wolf of the Patriots, or Monty Ossenford of the Cardinals. They're just like, hey, you want to come up? It's going to cost you a little bit more. But super interesting that little piece about they're looking to move up potentially before the draft. Now, Kwesi, Kevin O'Connell, like, it's going to be a fun week, man. It is. And yes, we run through the conspiracy theory that maybe the Vikings and the Patriots have something in their back pocket, depending on what the Commies do at 2. Or Monty Ossenford and Kwesi working something out. The pride of the University of Minnesota, Morris, getting something done with the Vikings. And even though they may not want to trade out of the top 10, I mean, the allure of having 3 first-round picks, 11, 23, and 27, has to be appealing for a man who's completely trying to rebuild that rooster out in the desert before that team moves like the Arizona Coyotes. And also, of course, Kwesi and Harbaugh going way back like chiropractic. If a quarterback falls out of the top 4, could they get a deal done at 5? And then Harbaugh gets a couple of swings to, I don't know, draft offensive linemen and or Michigan guys and or Michigan offensive linemen. It's all good. Now, like we said, 5 doesn't make sense. Because if you trade into the top 5 before the start of the draft and you're targeting one of the big 4 quarterbacks, you could be boxed out. And the Cardinals, I mean, Ossenford and the Cardinals could give you their word, Scouts honor, that they're not going to take a quarterback or trade out, but then they could trade out. That's what happens. Now, the Vikings would have to be sold on one of the big 4 quarterbacks. So Williams going to the Bears, right? And whether it's Daniels, May, or McCarthy, if they're even on all of them, then you could trade up to 4. All right, so then you're guaranteed to have one of the big 4 quarterbacks because beep, bop, bop, oh, boop. 4 players can't be selected in the first 3 picks. And again, that is a big if. That is a monster if. So you would be giving up a sizable chunk of draft capital, probably a first, probably a future first on top of 11, 23 to get to 4. All right. And you're doing that, and you're completely fine with McCarthy, Daniels, or May. That would be the scenario, right? 3 would be a little bit more alluring because then you would have your choice of 2 of the remaining big 4 quarterbacks. 2 would be the ultimate one, right? But there hasn't really been any steam about Washington moving down. I think Washington is going to stick and pick. And also, I think that Washington is going to take Jaden Daniels. So for me, I think the most realistic spot, if the Vikings were going to trade up before the draft, would be with the Patriots. And, of course, goes all the conspiracy theories, man, right, and all that stuff. But I would love to be surprised. I mean, if Washington deems that, hey, we can completely gouge the Vikings' eyes out, and the Vikings would be happy to pay it if the Vikings give up 3 first-rounders and change, maybe even Lewisine and Andrew Booth Jr., I don't know. Maybe Dan Quinn and the commies want to rebuild that secondary. Yeah, go ahead. But I don't know, man. But it is super interesting. The whole tidbit where I feel like this time of year you have to separate the wheat from the chaff, and it really is tough going through. But you can find super interesting tidbits of information of like, oh, maybe the Vikings are looking to move up before the draft, as opposed to everyone and their mom knows that they'd be looking to move up during the draft, but before could potentially be a game changer. And it could be a spot too. Yeah, Kwesi is making those calls, and maybe something gets done, and maybe the Vikings are able to get up to 2, 3, perhaps 4. But again, like we said, the Vikings have to be completely even on May, Daniels, and McCarthy. I think that's unlikely. 3, probably more likely. 2 seems like a pipe dream, but never say never, I guess. So we'll see. Anyways, your thoughts are thoughts. Again, BS season, but ESPN's Kimberly Martin reports that the Vikings are looking to trade up into the top 5 before the draft. And also, 5 does not make any sense. Let us know your thoughts and our thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work? Put a little something in the Venmo. But till next time, Skol, production value.